Howdy, beloved. I'm going to talk to you today about why I read. Yeah. So I wrote a list here in this little book about, in no particular order, about the reasons why I read. And ultimately, there's hundreds of these videos on YouTube. There are hundreds of reasons to read, but everyone's kind of perspective is different. And so I thought, hey, it's been a month since I've talked to you guys. We'll come on here and I'll just explain why I read. And hopefully this leads you to also partake in reading if you do not already. First, though, I'm going to share with you what I'm currently reading. So right now, I'm about 200 pages into the Gulag Archipelago, the first volume by Solzhenitsyn. I've been taking this work really slowly. I'm like 203 pages in. I've been taking it really slow. This is an extremely heavy read. And it's also full of history and stuff. And sometimes I get a little bogged down with it. It's just a really heavy book. We're not even to the gulags yet. And there's just so much horrible, terrible things that have happened in here. But for how much it can be enjoyed, I'm really enjoying it. This is my first foray into the the Soviet Union. And then my second read is one I'm actually going to put down because reading this has been super heavy. And I've realized I need something a little bit more palate cleansing-y. But I am reading The Crossing by Cormac McCarthy. This will be the second time I'm reading it. But I think I'm going to stop after the first part because, when Gulag gets a little too heavy, this is the backup. And if you've read this book, this is the most depressing book I've ever read. It's my favorite by Cormac, but I just don't know if I'm actually ready to embark with this again. But I started reading it because it's warmer here in the Mitten, and what goes best with summertime than reading about boys in the desert. So the first point that I wrote for why I read is that I think, and maybe this is the most important one to be honest, but it's hard to say, is that I think it is a good use of time. Let me give you a little context about myself. I'm 25 years old. I grew up with the birth of the iPhone and the rise of that, and the internet becoming more prevalent and more accessible all the time, as well with the rise of social media and everything. And so being so young and being exposed to all of that stuff for so long, it was kind of taking over my life, or it had taken over my life, even outside of high school and graduating and stuff. If I wasn't working, I was on my phone usually, or I was watching TV, or I was playing video games and stuff. And it's not that being on your phone and watching TV and playing video games, it's not that those are bad. But when you have no balance to those things and they consume the entirety of your downtime, I think that is not healthy, at least for me. And I got sick of it. So one of the main reasons I picked up reading was to draw myself away from that. And I can tell you now, it has been very helpful. I am much more amped to read than sit on my phone. And it's had such profound effects as where if I don't start my day reading in the mornings, if I wake up and I go on my phone instantly, I feel very off for the rest of the day. And so, yeah, I think it's a very good use of my time. And it's not that I've completely replaced whatever time I was spending on my phone with reading. However, reading is one of those things where I feel like it makes you productive in other areas of your life. I'm not one of those self-help people. I'm not going to tell you to sit down and make a schedule and stuff. That works for some people, but not for me. But if I'm reading, I'm more inclined to do other things that don't involve a screen. And that was kind of the goal in general. And all it took was me to just pull myself away initially. And now I will be more productive in my days than I used to be. Another reason I read is because it helps me kind of slow down and recenter myself. In the world today, everything is so go, 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 and so hustle. And it's been hitting me a lot lately. I'm not like, I feel like you'd get this thought when you're older. Maybe I just have an old soul or something, but I've just been like hit lately with like kind of the quickness of life and how short life is. Like, I'm 25, you know, I'm of the age where I can say like that happened 15 years ago, which is so weird to me. I digress. What I'm basically saying is our lives are so fast paced in the passage of time and in everything we do. And especially nowadays, too, with things like dopamine, they are constantly, like your dopamine's constantly being hit to the point where it wears itself out. And so, taking some time out of my day, at least 30 minutes I like to get done, helps me kind of sit back and relax, and like I'm just going to spend 30 minutes without my phone, without TV, without music, without anything, and I'm just going to pour myself into these pages, and I'm going to let this story take over my consciousness for a little bit. Notice that like in general I'm more calm about things, you know, but like I mentioned earlier, I'm also more productive because when I'm done reading, I'm not instantly reaching for my phone. Unless, of course, I get stumped in my reading. So actually, I'm going to stick on this point for another second, and I'm going to, if you'll let me, give you a tiny bit of life advice that has helped me, and I am positive would help hundreds of thousands of other people, because there's a lot of us on this earth, and I am not nearly as unique as I'd like to think I am. Just having like one little area of discipline in your life has ripple effects. If you can make it a goal to read a page a day of your books, eventually you're going to get so used to that, you're going to start reading 2 a day, and then 3 a day, 4 a day, 5 a day. But also these things ripple out, like I said, into other areas of your life. This is so like basic, but if you like just extend discipline in one little area, you're going to start extending it in other areas as well. Take it from me. I am a guy who loved sitting on the couch on my phone, watching TV, or sitting in my office playing video games. And over the past 2 years, you know, I read a lot. I am more amped to do work around the house. I exercise, I work out a lot, and it's just taking these little things. Like it just started here with reading, and it's blended over into positive life changes for me. So, I could go more into that, but we won't do that today. Another reason I love reading is because there are so many interesting things to learn about and to be introduced to. For example, the Gulag Archipelago, something I've heard thrown around a lot. When I first really heard of the Soviet Union, I feel like it was after high school. It was touched on in school, but it was nowhere near expounded upon as it probably should have been. And hearing a few things about it, like, drove me crazy. I was like, how did this happen? How, like, and this goes for a lot of other things within the 20th century as well. Lots of bad things happened then. But there's something about Russia that I feel particularly inclined to in some respects. So learning about their prison system and also just the day-to-day life in Soviet Russia from this book has been incredibly interesting. And this book, you know, will eventually lead me to other books. Like there's that book about Stalin and his entire reign and all the things he did in power, and so on and so forth. Another really good example of how I've been introduced into interesting things in reading things that interest me is I read The Passenger and Stella Maris by Cormac McCarthy, which are so incredibly obtuse books that you don't understand like anything of it. But there are a ton of talks of 2 things, math and science. Those are like the most prevalent. And beloved, let me tell you, I did pre-algebra 3 years in a row. I've always had a disdain for math and science. Even now, I still think math is kind of like, I won't go into it. But those were things like in my youth I never cared about. But now in my like adult mind, in my adult version of myself, I was swept off my feet by those talks, and it made me interested in them. I've never enjoyed either of those topics at all, and it's got me interested in them. But those books also talk a lot about philosophers and about dreams. and the connection with the unconscious. And so, that was the area I think I was most interested in. So I went out and I bought some books by Jung and Freud and history of philosophy book to kind of run me through the generalizations of the philosophers and stuff. And I think that's probably like the best part about books is when they draw you outside of the works to other books for investigation to help enrich in the experience you just had with that one book. Another reason why I read is because there are so many great writers. Cormac McCarthy comes to mind, Tolkien comes to mind, Chekhov comes to mind. These are authors who are all very kind of lyrical in their descriptions and in their writing and have tremendous flow. McCarthy books feel like a song almost. And it's weird because they're not like written in verse or written to be like a song, but they kind of have that tendency to them, like they kind of just go that way. In my video talking about my favorite authors, I said that Blood Meridian was kind of like a comfort book for me, which sounds so stupid, but the reason being is because the flow of that book, it's like a song, it's like a melody. But as I've talked about on the channel before, I used to write a lot of poetry when I was in high school. Granted, a lot of it was probably really bad, but I've always loved the manipulation of words to try and convey an emotion and try to convey something, and even just the play on words that you can make, where you say one thing, but based on how it's set up, it means this thing, or it can have endless interpretations to it. And that is like a joy to just have those good authors that really write in such beautiful ways, that make you like really think and appreciate, like, man, this is artistry. And to go along with that, the second point I wrote was you can't get these experiences from other forms of art. If I had to tier rank like forms of art, books would be at the top, and then maybe like paintings, like art, anything you do with the hand that is art is like below that, and then maybe like movies is probably next to it, and then like TV shows is probably a little under it. There are things in books that you cannot replicate in any other medium. And there's things in every other medium that sometimes you can't replicate in books or in paintings and whatnot. But I think just the way that like the written word has, where it's endless and you can expound so much upon that, and you can tell the reader exactly what you're thinking. You can give the reader insight into something. You can give the reader thoughts for something else. And you can, like I said, you can get all these things from all these other mediums, but I think books just take the cake because you could not make a movie, you could not make a TV show, you could not make a painting that encapsulates something like the Brothers Karamazov. There's no way. Even you do 9 seasons of it, if you do, it's like, it runs for 15 years, you cannot encapsulate the greatness of that through that medium. There's that saying of like, oh, books are always better than the movies or the shows, and sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not, and it's just, I think just the experience of reading is so good. And like I mentioned earlier too, reading is one of those things where it takes a long time for the payoff to kind of really kick in. My favorite example of this is probably Demons. The first 500 pages of Demons by Dostoevsky are, I don't want to say a slog. There's just not a lot happening, and it's very slow. But the last like 250 to 300 pages of that novel are the most gripping, accelerating, exhilarating words and actions that I've ever read. And it's like so nice that it's like you've put in all this work to finally get to that payoff. And again, like I said earlier, dopamine is constantly firing in today's age where we lose that. But having to put work in towards that is always going to be more beneficial for you. And I probably touched on this earlier, but the last thing I wrote was it is an expansion of your consciousness. This could be tied in with what I was talking about earlier with the introductions to new ideas and stuff. But yeah, I feel like, it's scientifically proven that reading is like really good for your brain. And there's so much literature out there that really demands like thought and consideration, and going outside the text and research on the text. And there are things that are going to agree with you. There are things that are going to challenge you. There are things that are going to vehemently disagree with you. And it's good to be exposed to all of that because helps you figure out things in your own life, in your own walk and philosophy. I think that's invaluable. As someone who spent a lot of his life not thinking about anything important. Now I've been introduced to things that still not always important, probably more important than what I used to be thinking about. I think it's because of these reasons that you should read. I don't want to sound pretentious, and I don't want to sound like reading is only ever intellectual. If you are reading, it is good. However, I strongly encourage you. It is so interesting and neat to read books that are outside of your field of scope, outside of your range, outside of your comprehension, and to be confronted with these ideas. We only have one life here, you know. We are never granted tomorrow, you know. We trust that we are, but it's never for certain. So I think if you are going to spend your time doing something like this, you ought to make it really meaningful, and read things that challenge you. Read things where you can connect with the characters. Read things where you enjoy the characters, you study them, where you enjoy the themes and you study the themes. And I think it just will, like the ripple effect I mentioned earlier, it'll make everything in life so much more rich for you. Or it'll destroy you, which has happened to me a couple times here. So, okay, beloved, I love you. Thank you for listening to me ramble. I hope that this maybe has inspired you to read. And yeah, I love you. God bless you. Happy Memorial Weekend. I will see you in the next video.